I had to hop out. Hopefully y'all got the email, and I let a few people who were in here early know. My wife was sick; she just wasn't feeling good, and I had to give her a ride home. And so I thought it'll be fine. I recorded the lecture for my previous class, right? I can just share that with you all. Anybody try to watch that? Were you like trying to figure out what was wrong with your headphones? Yeah, there's nothing wrong with your headphones. It didn't record with audio for some reason. I don't know why.
It's because of the folly of mankind.
Yeah, it was folly man kind of thing. So that means some of you probably still tackled the run or tackled some other animations. That's cool. I'm glad you're still working forward. But I feel like I kind of dropped the ball on not being able to give you that lecture. And I was going to dig around and find the one from last year, but I decided instead what I was going to do is just do a little cramming today. So it kind of, more than anything, I'm wanting to keep both of my classes on schedule. So what I'm going to do is everybody for the homework today, you get full credit. Good job. We will have a homework next class period, and basically it'll just be showing your progress of wherever you're at, because that's sort of the last time we'll be able to do a check-in with your mentors, like a homework check-in with your mentors for credit before the project's due. So as you'll notice, we are here, right? Which means in 1 week we have the critique on this project. How y'all feeling about that? Okay. It's not this Thursday. It's a week from today, so Tuesday.
I would love spring break to work on this.
Yeah. Well, you have spring break to work on it. So what I decided to do, I was thinking about, like, should I change the date? What I realized, and I guess it really, Kat and Amy, are you the only two who are in portfolio this semester in this class? I think so too. So one of the reasons I put it on Tuesday is because I want you all to be able to have Project 2 as something you can present, right? So I was like, let's go ahead and have it due then. That way you can be done with that. After that, you can turn in as many revisions as you want. So let's go ahead and keep a standing deadline of that, but recognizing that immediately following that, we have spring break, and that's plenty of time to do some revisions on it. And if my speed of grading is any sign of how quickly I will grade this future projects, you'll probably beat me to a revision, right? But I'd like to finish up grading on that over the spring break. We'll see how that goes. Sort of to piggyback off of that, currently all of the grades should be up to date. I may be like one homework grade behind or something, but all the grades should be up to date in D2L, including Project 1. I know it took me a little longer than I really wanted it to get to it. But also, you'll be getting your early semester progress reports as well. And that was one of the things that I wanted to make sure I got all of that grading in before I put in that progress report. So the progress report should reflect what I have graded up to this point. I don't know if it always gives you a running tally of what the grade is in D2L. Does it? Does it ever tell you what like your grade is? It just tells you what you got for each project. I have no idea how to make it do that. Like I've asked the people who are over D2L at ETSU, they don't know how to do it either. So
You can just do the math, can't you?
you can
Just
if you
do
like
the
math.
fractions next to each other and then do the...
Yeah, I trust that, yeah. So if you need help figuring out what your grade is, I think Kat just volunteered to teach you how to do that. But if you ever need to know, I have a running tally of it. It shows me. I don't know why it won't show you. So I'll work on that too. But final thing before we sort of jump into class, it's election day, and for some reason our country doesn't make that a holiday. If you need to vote, and this is the only time you can, go vote. It's an excuse. I'll excuse that as an absence. Like that's fine. Or if you need to hop out early, I think the polls are open late. I think they're open till 8, as long as you're in line by 8. So but if you have something else going on, like that's important. Go do that. And also wash your hands. So just sort of I feel like everybody's like watching the news with the whole coronavirus thing. It is something I think we should be like conscious of, and just making sure that we're being careful not to to not spread anything more than we have to. So we got the hand sanitizer back here. Wash your hands often. Apparently, those are two of the biggest ways of preventing any of that. Also, my wife taught me a new word. It's called social distancing. Like standing like not really, really close to people when you talk to them. Also, apparently, is one of the other things that help. So, yeah, we'll see what the next few weeks brings. And if you just see me walking around with a stick that is approximately 6 feet long, and I'm like constantly holding people at the length of that stick. Anyway, I just kind of wanted to talk about all those things. All right, so since we missed last lecture, I'm going to go over what I went over in that lecture, which is basically the walk-run situation, like the run cycle, right? It's a little bit more of a lecture, and some of it is probably recap of stuff that you've seen before. I cover a little bit of the technical side of what we do inside of Unreal with that. And then I'm also going to go ahead and just squeeze in what we were going to do today and tomorrow as well. So basically today we're going to cover the walk, the jump, and the punch. Basically because the jump and punch part of the lecture is like 15 minutes. Like it's really pretty short. I don't walk you through it. I tell you the things to look for while you're working on it. And in all honesty, the jump animation doesn't have that much animation in it. Like it's a couple of keyframes. Like I think the entire animation for the jump, like you maybe have like 4 keyframes or something if you're doing it the way that I kind of assumed. So I'm going to kind of do all of that today in the name of having a full work day on Thursday. I know you kind of had a work day last class period too, but it was probably a less directed work day because I hadn't gone through this lecture yet. So yes.
If we're working in an engine that doesn't have like a jump, float, land transition already built into it, is it alright if we don't do the start jump and end jump?
Yeah, whatever you have to make to get it to work in the game is fine.
Okay.
I don't know how does it handle it? Does it just not have a jump up and a jump down? You just have a jump state?
The thing is, in Game Maker Studio, I have to tell it when to do certain sprites,
Okay.
and that's more complicated than it sounds because I have to like actually code it in code. And so the engine I have set up already, it's set up for running and then standing still and then in midair and then a going to sleep thing. If you stand still for too long, it goes to sleep.
Right.
And then I'm going to add an attack animation into that.
I think that would be fine. I've seen in a lot of 2D animations, sometimes, or a lot of 2D games, sometimes you don't have the jump up, you just have a jump state that's like an idle loop, and it just plays that animation whenever the character's off the ground. And what you lose is a little bit of that kickoff and that landing, but it seems to work okay in 2D animation.
In the game I was making with this engine, I also had a particle effect when she jumped.
Okay, then that'll help too to give you that kickoff.
I can do something like that.
Yeah, and every one of them is going to be slightly different. So that's one of the things that we'll kind of look at. This class is also different because the majority of people are doing this in 2D, I think, which is cool. It makes it a little harder for me to say this is the step-by-step process of going through all of this. How many of you are still doing this in 3D though? Okay, so we got a handful of people who are still doing it in 3D. So this one's for you. No, I think it's cool to hear all because all the lectures still kind of apply, and I think that you're gonna find some of it useful anyway. Just out of curiosity, this is one of those this is one of those projects that a lot of people come in. Well, some people come into it thinking they're not going to like it, right? One of the reasons I make it a project is because a lot of people come out the other end with a different perspective of it. How are y'all feeling about the project? Are you enjoying this one?
I thought I was going to like it.
And now you don't.
The more I hate everything that's not animated. If I am not getting to work on the animations, I hate it and I'm not enjoying it, and I just want to get back to that. And
Yeah.
I don't enjoy it at all.
So I think that is one of the things that yeah, I think especially the first one, like that's sometimes the takeaway for it, is that part is annoying to you. In most cases, you're not the one who's going to be doing too much of that, but I think more to the point is after you do it once, it just becomes a smaller chore. It's like I hate bringing my image sequences into Premiere and compiling that, right? Because the first few times that was really hard, but like it gets a little easier. And I think if you're still enjoying the animation part, recognize that other stuff is pretty easier. It's a little easier to overcome after a while. So don't let that completely turn you off from it. But I get that. That's cool. Hopefully you're enjoying the animation parts of it. Something else that I do notice is that somewhere around this time is where people start kind of splitting up into a couple of camps. And one camp is I like body mechanics, I like making things move, and the other camp is I like telling a story, I like making things act, right? And that's going to sort of continue. You're going to continue to gravitate toward one or the other. And even if you're doing like creatures, it's sometimes you like making creatures move, sometimes you like making creatures act, right? Recognize that we're still in sort of the body mechanics parts of this, right? If what you really may start gravitating toward is the acting part, and everybody's going to kind of have their own parts of that you like, and so the thing that I would say is we mentioned portfolio earlier, right? I did talk to Cher. Turns out portfolio is on Tuesday and Thursday. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
She just totally screwed us.
It happens. Well, I thought that's when it was. And I think it was at the end of the semester, it's going to be on Thursday, Friday. But the middle semester is Tuesday, Thursday, 5 o'clock. And so I'll remind you again on Tuesday. But come check out some of those portfolios. 2 of them are going to be people who are in this class, but the other character animation class I have has a whole bunch of other people who are in it. Got a lot of animators this semester. And a portion of them are going to be well, Kat, you are, who else is a shooting
Don't
animator?
come to mind.
Yeah, come here. I just saw Cats. It's really good. Come here. But there's a lot of variety in it. There's one person who's doing exclusively creature animation. There's a couple of people. Parker is doing very cartoony animation. So there's a variety of stuff. I think that while you're in this class, it's good to see like sort of the end game of that and to get an idea of where you may be headed. Okay.
I will say that's the single best determining factor of how well you're going to do a portfolio.
Is by going and trying or by watching?
Like going and seeing what a portfolio is.
I will say the other one is meeting with your mentors a lot once you're in portfolio, because there's still at least one student in portfolio who I've not seen at all yet, and I'm pretty sure I'm his
Do
mentor.
I know him?
I mean, you're in the class with him. He's not here, but so I'm concerned. That is one of the best ways, like seeing how other people do, learn from other people's successes and mistakes, and that way when you get up there, you are more prepared to go for it. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, and hopefully by next week, or maybe even by next class period, I'll have a list of who's going when. You all haven't gotten that yet, have you?
You should get it today.
Today, okay, cool. I'm sure Cher will send it to us, but I may hit one of you up if she's not sending it to us quickly. That way, I'd like to share that with the class so people can see when different people are going, so you can come see them. Yeah. All right, let's do this. So we're going to start with the walk. I have some videos. Let's watch this guy walk. Yay, he's walking. Wait, am I recording? I'm recording. On an adventure. I want to open this up in VLC. So, you all have done walk cycle animations before. You were in the principal's class, and that was the last thing they had to do was that robot walk. And so sort of the quick recaps of that, of course, is that there are 4 key poses in any walk cycle. Does anybody remember what we call them?
Contact down, passing up.
Contact down, passing up. Chris just jumped right on that one.
So-
Like that grenade
For
is
sure.
rolling across the floor, and everybody's like, and Chris is like, whoa, and like, good job. So, contact down, passing up. And so I think that we start off looking at a walk. I know that most of you are probably doing a run for your animation, but let's start with something that we're kind of familiar with, a walk, right? For any walk to happen, like to physically be possible, those 4 key poses are necessary, right? In fact, learning to walk, that's usually what's happening is kids are figuring out the mechanics of those 4 steps, right? And so that's what we're getting here, and let's just sort of break it apart one pose at a time, right? Of course, this is from the Animator Survival Kit. Anybody have this book?
No, but I've seen this image 1,000 times.
1,000 times. It's because it's a great book. I have a copy of it downstairs if you ever want to look at it. Richard Williams, who actually died last year, animator of Roger Rabbit, wrote it. And sort of this is the breakdown that everybody points at, right? Contact, down, passing, and up. Your contact pose is called that because of why? You're making contact with the ground, right? It's also the last point in which you're making contact with your rear foot as well, right? You're getting ready to push off from that foot. Why might we call that the down pose?
Because it's down.
It's down.
When you're right down on the foot, you're making contact.
It's down. Yeah, everything is kind of going down there, right? Your foot is going flat instead of up on the heel, right? Your hips are at the lowest point that they will be. Your head is at the lowest point that they'll be. Something to sort of point out on both of these is that we need to remember that the arms counter the legs, right? So in this case, the character's right foot is forward, whereas the character's right arm? Backward, right? If you try to do that together, right, left and right together, you look like this, right? And it's actually really hard to do. Like, try walking like that sometimes. Yeah.
That's how camels walk, and they're called the ships of the sea, because if you sit on a camel walking, it feels like you're going back and forth like you're on a ship.
Yeah, it is. Like it's got to, because they would have to shift all of its weight that way. Some other animals will walk that way too. But yeah, camels, like, that is their like standard walk. So the reason that that's happening, and the reason the camel has to shift its weight so much, is because when we counter this way, we're actually staying in balance more, right? Like if I stick this leg out to one side, it makes me more heavily weighted to that side, and I start to tip over. The way I counter that is if I stick my arm out to the opposite side, right? So we're kind of getting this countering motion that keeps us more in balance, or more in like this equilibrium of balance as we're walking, right? The balance comes into a big part of this. Like our characters are shifting their weight from side to side, and that balance is one of the reasons it's hard to learn to do, right? So we'll get to that here in a few minutes, and we'll talk about a couple of other things. We have the passing pose. What is passing in this pose? So the hands are passing by the side, right? So they're reversing, right? The rear hand is going to the front, and the same is happening with the feet. The opposite rear foot is going to the front as well, right? So everything is passing in its, like, which is in the front, which is in the back. Now the head height in this and the hip height in this is probably somewhere around the same height as your contact pose. And then we go to our up pose. This is the highest pose that we are going to have, right? The way I like to think of it is, you've heard me say pole vault before, right? Like our character is pole vaulting over their front leg, right? If you look at the passing pose, the character is in balance. They can stay in that pose indefinitely, right? I can stand on one leg with both of my arms to the side. To move forward, I have to throw myself out of balance, right? I have to tip myself past that, right? And that means they're trying to get their leg out there in front of them before they face plant, right? They don't want to just like collapse into the ground. So they're throwing their foot forward. To buy themselves a little bit more time, they go a little higher, right? You'll also see the foot kind of drags a little bit behind that because you're really trying to whip it out there and catch yourself. And then we get back to the contact again. Of course, this is just for one step. and to be a complete cycle, to make it loop, right, we need 2. So to do that, you got contact, down, passing, up, contact, down, passing, up, contact again, right? And that's how we get a full loop. For a walk cycle to work in a game, your first pose and your last pose have to be exactly the same. If there's any change, you're going to get a little pop at that loop point, right? It's going to like snap. So really, you're just going to copy that keyframe, make sure that everything is on the same keys on that. So again, to get that full cycle, we have to have two steps. How do I zoom in? There we go. And no matter what we call them, recoil, passing, high point, whatever, all of this physics is the same. These 4 poses are necessary in order for a character to have locomotion forward and stay in balance without falling over. Right. So, back to this guy walking, we can look at this in slow motion and we can find all of those poses. Now before I jump through those, notice in the front pose, as he goes to the passing pose, or in the front view, as he goes to the passing pose, he's shifting his weight over the supporting leg, right? He's doing this, basically. Right? Because if you don't do that, you fall over. Right? If you try to raise one of your legs up, you fall over. Now, if we look over here in the side view, we can find almost all of these. Somebody taught me this earlier. So let's skip forward a frame or 2 at a time. So we got contact, right? Maybe there's the contact, right? And then we're going to step forward a few more poses. You'll see the foot goes forward, the hips dip. Probably about there is the down. So you see the back foot kind of kicked off, right? Keep going forward more. Come on. Stop that. Sorry, give me 1 second. So probably back a little bit. So probably about there is the passing, right? And then finally, if we go forward a few more steps, probably about there is the up, right? So we're seeing all of those happen just sort of one frame at a time. So they're all there, and these key poses are kind of predefined for us. The hard part about it is we see people walking so much that even though we got this roadmap for how to get a walk cycle, right? We are also really good critiquers of walk cycles. We've seen them so much that if even the slightest thing is off, it feels weird to us, right? So this walk cycle is true regardless, or these poses are true regardless of the type of walk cycle, regardless of gender, regardless of emotion. All of those things are the same. So this one's an interesting to look at. There's actually a couple of studies out where they do motion capture of men and women walking, and then they apply that motion capture to a stick figure. And people can relatively accurately guess gender based off of the way a person walks. The reason for that isn't, there's a lot of reasons for that. And it's because there's certain traits that happen, both anatomically and probably culturally as well, that make something seem, to give it a word, more masculine or more feminine, right? A couple of those things we can see here, right? We talked about the character has to shift their weight to stay in balance. So when something's more masculine or sort of seen as more masculine, usually the feet are further apart and there's a larger weight shift from side to side, right? So it's like feet wider apart and you sort of shift your weight more. And a good example of this maybe like as a cowboy like strut, right? You get this really wide stance with this big shift. That's seen as more masculine. To see something as more feminine, like look at her feet. It's like she's walking a straight line. Like she's putting one foot in front of the other. So instead of them being wide apart, they're narrow together, right? Some of that maybe is learned or cultural. Women, worn dresses, historically. So it seems like, walk with your whatever. Like there's some reasons for that. Maybe it's, but if you think of something like a runway model, right? They're almost pushing it to an exaggerated length. It's like they're crossing their legs as they walk, right? When that happens, that means your body still has to stay in balance. And this person, to keep her body in balance, instead of shifting her weight, rotates her hips more. Right? So when we see like a larger hip rotation instead of motion side to side, we read that as feminine. Right? I bring all this up not necessarily. I mean, I think it's interesting, like sociologically, but I think more than interesting, more than that, is you can recognize that this is a slider that you can use, right? If you want to push your character to feel more of one of those things, whether it's masculine, feminine, whether it's sad, happy, whether it's angry, whatever it is, all of these are these sliders that you can turn up and down by knowing what it is that makes that read that way, right? And so feminine and masculine is one that's very easy to tell. And so because she's rotating her hips a lot, that means she has to rotate her shoulders more to stay in balance. You end up with a much stronger contrapposto. Masculine, less contrapposto, bigger weight shift, more stiff torso, right? Other elements of this could be anatomical. There's slightly different bone structure and fat distribution between male and female. And so she's maybe carrying a little bit more of her weight lower, where a more masculine character maybe is carrying it a little bit more up in their chest, and they would just move differently, right? So all of these are things that you can control. Regardless of any of those things, though, the mechanics are still the same. We still have contact down, passing it up, and like this in this example, if you had to pick an emotion or a state of mind for this character, what would you say it is? Worried, sad. So it's definitely
Chill.
Just
vibing.
Just going to Disneyland. She's definitely got like some concern, right? She got worried, and she's concerned about something that's not making her happy, right? Like it's not like I wonder if I got an A or an A+ on that test, right? It is definitely like she's got some concern about that, and I think that we can all read that right off the bat just by looking at it. And you may not even know why you can read that. Like you may not even know what gives you that gut instinct that that's what she's feeling. But learning to identify those things helps you sort of control that. So one of the things that's probably reading as worried is that she's kind of looking down, right? Like she's got a little bit of this like sad, depressed thing going on because she's curling forward, she's looking down. We usually think of that as like tired, defeated, depressed, sad, right? But why we're probably seeing worried or concern in this is also it's a very guarded pose, right? She's got her hands tucked in. She's protecting her internal organs, right? She's making herself the smallest target she can. All of those are natural defense mechanisms when you're feeling under attack in some way, right? Emotionally or physically. You make, like, just evolutionary, we make ourselves smaller, right? And she's doing that. Like she's minimizing her ability to be hurt, right? All of that will read to us as that. And so like, those are all things that we can understand and have control of, right? It takes a little bit of studying it, but when you study an example, you can start to find those things that are cluing you into why that feels that way. So, for example, it's a slow motion walk, but what's up with this dude? How's he feeling?
Like he's a cheeseburger.
Yeah, like he's a cheeseburger? Or
He needs one.
he needs a cheeseburger for protein. Yeah, so he's very like, huh?
Heavy.
So he's heavy. He's got some mass to him, right? And I think, what about emotionally though? Like how you feeling?
Tired.
He's very tired. Yeah, sluggish. Like maybe even like he just got out of a fight or just got out of a hard day of work or something. Like he's just exhausted.
His pose says fight to me. Like it looks like he's still like getting off of the coming down from the adrenaline rush of being in a fight.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Oh, I get that. So I think some of the things to notice about this that is making it read this way, because this has a contact, a down, a passing, and up as well, right? Some of it's that like curled over, that feels tired or down, right? I think what's making him feel sort of beat up, whether it's emotionally or physically, is the lack of control. Like look how his feet like all kind of hit all over the place. It's like he's sort of staggering a little bit from side to side. His arms, it's like he's just let them go limp and they're just flopping, right? It's like, the other thing is like, when we talk about that passing or that up pose where he's like throwing that foot out in front of himself to catch himself, he's barely making it. Like that foot's barely getting out there in time to keep him from falling, right? He's like falling out in front of it, he's barely catching himself. And that's giving it this like stomp every time he steps because he's just barely getting that foot underneath him in time to not fall, right? All of these are things that we can adjust, right? Like notice, I can pause it.
Is he flat-footed?
He is, like watch his contact pose, he lands like very much like just flat, like he doesn't hit heel, he's hitting like on the ball of his foot, right? So like there's some interesting stuff going on here that we can learn from it. But look how far back he's pushing his back foot, right? And that's also like, it's a really subtle thing, but in an energetic contact pose, as soon as that front leg has got you, that back leg kicks off, right? Like right now, both of his feet are still on the ground, right? He's waiting to the very last minute to pick up that back foot too, and is pushing it way back behind him, right? Because that back foot's heavy. It's just another thing he has to exert energy on. So I feel this dude. I don't know, like I'm I have an
Cheeseburger, Greg?
I do.
Did you just get out of a fight?
I did.
Were you fighting over a cheeseburger?
Fighting over a cheeseburger. I win that fight every time.
I think she may be instigating the fight.
I think, yeah. She's the one who actually ate the cheeseburger.
I was gonna say they just got in a fight and over the cheeseburger and they dropped the cheeseburger so they couldn't eat it. So now they're both, one's real tired and sad, the other was real mad about it.
Yeah. I like the storytelling elements of it. So, what's her deal? Like, what's she feeling?
She's aggressive.
Aggressive. She's angry, ain't she?
Yeah, she's a little bit angry about this.
So, interesting thing, like she's still stomping that foot, right? I think one of the things that really clues you in on this, let me let it start again. One is the name, Walk Angry, right? But the other is, look at the angle of her body. She's like leaning in on that thing, right? She's gonna punch you with her face. Like she's just like coming straight at you, right? And she's like not worried at all, right? Like she's gonna take you down. Little things like her hands being a fist add to it. But other things like the way she swings her arm back is very much like she's punching the air, right? Like watch her as she's walking here. So she's like slamming them down with each step, right? So all of these are things that we can control and change, right? Once we understand that the mechanics of a walk are the same, right? Contact down, passing, and up are all still there. These are just things that we can change about them to give each of them a different feel or personality, right? Okay, so we've just spent all this time talking about walks, but I know most of you are probably doing a run, right? Because if you play a game where your character is walking, it takes you forever to get anywhere.
Walking simulators.
Walking simulator. I actually like those personally, but I also
They have kind of a reputation.
they do. Yeah, I think there's so many bad ones. Like I really liked.
It's easy to make a bad one.
Yeah, it's like I bought some assets from the asset store, and now I'm
Yeah.
going to make you walk through them really slowly.
And I can make you feel emotions. I mean, I can't, but I can try to.
Yeah. Dear Esther was the first one I played, and it was like, I don't know, it was interesting. But I don't know, I really like Gone Home a lot. Do I?
World of Warcraft is basically a walking And then it was turn-based combat, and then you got to walk some more.
Walk some more. Getting in your steps, getting in your virtual cardio. So really the reason we talk about this is because all of these poses are exist in a run cycle as well. Contact down, passing up. I kind of disagree on what I would call the up pose. I usually would think more like 6 is the up pose. It's a little faster. There's one big distinction between a walk and a run though. Can anybody tell what that is?
Both feet come off the ground.
Feet come off the ground, right? In a walk, there is, at any given point, there's never a point where both of your feet are off the ground. Like you always have one foot touching the ground. You don't pick up your back foot until that front foot is on the ground, right? It kind of passes off a little bit there, but in a run, there's a point where both feet leave the ground, okay? That's why there is a difference then, like if you ever, you can't just take your walk cycle and speed it up and suddenly it's a run, right? That's speed walking. That's what old people are doing at the mall right now. And there's a reason it sort of has this like stereotype of being for old people. And that's because running is very jarring on your old bones. I know, I don't run, and it's not because I'm old, it's because I'm fat. But it does, it hurts. That it's really, if you look at it, a run is just a sequence of jumps, right? You're bounding, right? You're just making these hops.
In the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, if you jump while you're while you're running, if you jump over and over again, he alternates feet that he jumps off, so it looks like he's doing big bounding runs.
Oh, that's cool.
It's so cool. When I noticed that, I was like, holy crap, they put detail in this game.
I've had that game for over a year and I still haven't played it.
I can understand why you wouldn't play it, because you would have no time to teach class if you were just playing Breath of the Wild.
And y'all want me to teach this class. I know. So I know we got a Switch and I played Rhyme and a couple of other little things. I bought Breath of the Wild when it came out, and I just haven't played it.
Do you like puzzle games?
Sometimes.
Have you played Baba Is You? That's a mind-bending game. It's a little like indie puzzle game. It's really good.
I don't know. I'll play it eventually. But all of them are, so that is something that's very interesting, is that you get this hop in the middle. In fact, I was showing some people in the first class that a very cartoony run is actually the same exact keyframes as a bouncing ball, right? Your feet are on the ground much less time for that contact down passing section. You can do that in like 3 frames, but the up is a bigger bounce, right? And so, I mean, this is how you scale this. When you have those keys happen, can have like some stylistic choices. But the big difference is that frame number 6 here, or let's say frame number 6, this is 24 frames a second. Both feet are going to be off the ground, right? Try it out sometime. Start walking, walk fast, and recognize to turn that into a run, you actually have to start jumping, right? And you'll feel it happen. This is actually an interesting, I'll show you this. This is Muybridge, his studies of this. And you'll see like right here in the middle, these two are the characters up off the ground. There was actually, this was used to settle some debates because there was an argument amongst people at this time, which is the late 1800s, whether horses' feet all came off the ground at the same time or not, right, in a gallop. And he filmed it, or he took all these pictures of it and was able to show that it did. And just the idea that people were sitting around arguing about this while they watched a horse run. They're like, I couldn't tell, it was going too fast, right? Like that wasn't, like that was a little over, maybe 120 years ago, 150 years ago. So this is something that is, I just thought that was an interesting little quirk. Something to notice in this guy is really running, right? This is like sports running, like he's an Olympic runner or something. Notice that, do it.
As a new.
Yeah. So the faster you run, the less up and down there is in that run, right? The less of a jump that is. You're still jumping, both feet are still leaving the ground, but when you're jumping forward, right? All of your momentum, all of your energy is put into making you go faster forward, right? So the faster you go, the less up and down you get and the more like you start to sort of level out. And so if you look at the height on this guy's hips, he's going up and down a little bit, but it's not nearly as much as you might think. Even on his up, the feet are not. And it's because that up and down motion is wasting energy that could be used to drive you forward. Right? The other little thing, if for those of you who like to run, you'll notice that the contact pose in a walk, you hit on your heel. If you hit on your heel in a run, you're actually just slowing yourself down every step. Right? It's like you're driving your foot into the ground and slowing yourself down. A lot of runners will land slightly bent-kneed on their toes, or like on the ball of their foot. That way you can just kind of kick underneath yourself to drive yourself forward. So, having said that, like most of us have never been taught how to run fast, right? And so lots of people run incorrectly, and I know I do. So this is something to kind of think about, right? Like where that energy is going. He's running fast enough that gravity isn't the bothersome force, right? That's trying to pull him to the ground as much. And we can see a lot of this in the like slow motion videos. I really don't need the sound. Yeah, this is like somebody being creepy on YouTube, filming a guy running. Put some music to it. Yeah, thanks. There's a little bit of something out there for everybody. So, but you'll be able to see it. Contact, down, passing, and then up. Right? All of those poses are still in there. Now the timing of when they hit is maybe a little different, but they're all in there. Now I did want to talk about one more thing. In a walk or in a run, right, we're going to see the way the foot arcs. Right? And so I'm going to go ahead and do. So with this, your foot is going to come along this way, right? And then what is going to be tempting for a lot of you is to do something like this with your foot's arc, right? But that's not what your foot does. What your foot actually does is, again, that straight line is correct, right? But then once it gets to here, it pushes off and backward. So it kind of does like this. Comes up and then arcs back down this way and swings through here. Right? And then right at the end, it's going to pick up and slam down. All right. And so if you look at that, it's kind of like a little fish. Right? It's a whale. It swallowed Jonah. I don't know. No, you can make that whatever you want to, but that is the arc that you're usually going to get out of that. And getting that arc clean will actually help. And pushing that arc, right, is if you like really push it out this way, really get this arc up, like you can really make this a little bit of a stronger animation. Now, parts of this is going to be very fast, like that little raise up and hit the ground. Sometimes that happens so fast you don't really see it. So like you may not even have that as much. But this is the arc that you're going to see in the way a foot runs. And if we sort of watch that video again, we'll see that. You see it? Kicks up and down, sort of dips forward there. So, all right. Questions about this part? Okay, so I'm going to do a couple of really quick things in Maya and Unreal. Right. I want to look at Unreal really quick here. First, I did want to show you, I meant to do this earlier. There's actually a really quick way in which we can, I get mine launched here, go Epic Games Launcher. And I know I've talked about this, but we can add environments to this pretty easily. And I think I remember my password now. Oh wait, maybe this is my, tell you what I'm going to do. There we go. So one of the things you can do, and I just wanted to show you how to do this, and maybe by the time the end of the class is over, it'll be done downloading and it'll work. Where are you at, Epic? Really? Let's try that again. There we go. In the games launcher, go to Unreal Engine, go to Marketplace, and then under Free, we can choose this like Epic Free Content. There's a whole bunch of different stuff you can see here, but anything with the word Infinity Blade on it, those are like full free environments, right? So I can do this temple here. If I click on it, where it's free, I can either do add to cart or I can just hit the free button. And that pretty much just adds it to cart and buys it at the same time. But since it's free, it doesn't actually charge any. And once I did that, I get this add to project, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and say add to project, and it's gonna say which project? And I'm gonna be like, this project. And I click that, add to project. And what it's gonna do is slowly start downloading it and putting it in my folder, right? It's 2 gigabytes, so it'll take a little while, but this is actually going pretty quick. And so while it's doing that in the background, I'll go ahead and be showing you some stuff in Unreal, and then we can launch one of those levels here in a minute to see how it works. So again, I don't really have a great run in here. My idle's looking okay. It could definitely be a little bit better. I haven't animated that far. But I get this as my idle, right? Now we talked about this before. If I go to my third person BP and go to blueprints, third person character, and I go up to my viewport and choose this character movement inherited, you'll see that I can adjust my run speed or my max walk speed right there. So right now it's at 400. That feels a little slow to me, right? Maybe I would go like 600. So what I would say to do is try to get that speed as close as possible, right? But when we play this, you'll notice that if I run from this side, you can't see it as well in here. Like what we're really trying to avoid is seeing the feet sliding, right? Which means as our character's feet hit the ground, I want it to move back at the right speed in order to make it feel like the character's foot is really staying stuck to the ground, right? Now this character actually makes this a little more complicated to do that, but there's a way that we can do that, right? That 600 I just typed in is 600 units per second, right? So if when you brought your character in, it was the right size in the game, that just means I can go to Maya and let me set my project here real quick. And I can get my run, and I can animate this platform at 600 units a second moving forward, and I'll be able to see what my run looks like. Right? Now, really what I'm doing, I'm still animating my run in place here. Let's go ahead and find that animation. Game exporter, go to my run here, right? This platform that is happening here, right? Right now is completely still, and this is how I want to export out. This is how I want to export out my animation, is with this platform in place, right? But to test it, I could see what that looks like by going out here to 30 frames, right? Because it's actually, yeah, 30 frames will work. And I can move this platform in this direction 600 units, right? And in theory, this should work. If I do that, I'll go ahead and open up my graph editor so I can look at this. So I got this translate Z, frame that up, right. Set that to linear, right. That should be my character running forward at the same speed. Now there is a problem with that, which is this character didn't come in at a 1-to-1 ratio. Right? If you'll remember, I had to go in here and grab this character and scale him down to 0.7, right? Which means I have to do a little bit of math if I want to figure out what his actual ratio is, and I don't like doing math. But I think this is right. I would have to try this and see and test it out. But I think I would just multiply that by 0.3 and add that to the 600. So that's the distance that he is going. I hope that is correct. So basically I would do 600 times 0.3, whatever that number is, I would add that to the...
No, it's 180.
180? Yeah, that sounds about right.
Just 0.1, yeah.
Right. The other thing I could do is I could try scaling down my character inside of Maya and redoing my animation so I don't have to scale them here. If your character came in and you didn't have to scale them though, that number that is in Unreal is the number that your character is moving in Maya as well. And the reason that's important is because then you can fix that foot sliding in Maya one keyframe at a time if you have to, right? Okay, let's see how, it looks like, yeah, add to project, already did. So you'll see now, I got this environment pack 2 in here. So where I had added to that project, right, in Unreal now, you'll see environment pack 2, and I can go in here under maps, and I'll just try demo map 3. And all of these, or I can just use the content from these because there's level content to build my own level. And basically what this is going to do is it's going to give us a better environment for my character to be running around in. So, give it just a second here to load. Maybe several minutes. Maybe we'll give it several minutes. Okay, so while this is loading, any questions on this run, walk, stuff? Okay. So there's two more animations we want to be able to look at in here, and that is the jump and the punch, right? I'd like to do the punch first, but right now this is still slowly. May have been a mistake. Oh, there it goes. So we'll look at the jump and the punch here as soon as this is finished loading. And while it's doing that, I will go find video files I need for that. Okay, so here's my level, and if I hit play, the materials still haven't sort of finished loading in here. You'll see there's 1,500 of them down here in the bottom corner. But I have a more interesting environment for my tiger to run around in. Right. Watch him go. So what we're going to get out of this is a little bit more of an interesting environment for you to be able to show off your animations. And it's so easy to add in there. Like it's worth just doing it. It'll end up making a better portfolio piece because you have some world for it to happen in, right? Obviously, if you're doing this in 2D, you don't get that for free as easily. You're welcome to use previous art that you've done before for like backdrops and stuff. But I think on the other side of that is I don't think it's quite as technical in terms of getting it implemented into the engine. I know that there's still a little bit of stuff you got to do, but like export time, all of that stuff is a little bit faster in 2D, hopefully. So while this is compiling, let's go ahead and start looking at the jump animation. So this one's one that I think is interesting because of how little animation is actually in it, right? So let's look at what I currently have in here. These are my stub animations, right? We have, just going to double click on these. My jump up. Watch him go. Ooh. So at any point, hopefully you realize this, you can double click on these animations, open them up, and you can view them, right? Hold down Alt, you can sort of tumble around the character a little bit more. And if I pause this, you'll see that I can go through this frame by frame. And what I have right now, frame 1, is this contact pose where he pushes off, right? And then frame, at the end of it, frame 5, where he's up in the air in sort of this idle pose. This pose should be the first pose of your loop animation. And your loop animation is just whatever pose you want your character to stay in while they're perpetually in the air, okay? So for me, my character's tiger jump loop is longer. It's about 60 frames, it's about 2 seconds. And I have something like this, right? Really what it's going to be though is it's going to be very much, I'm going to create it very much in the same way I created my standard idle. I'm going to go in there and sort of make my curve sort of loop and sort of have a floatiness to it, right? It's just shorter, so I'll probably get a little bit more of this like bob and sway happening while it's in the air, right? Important to note, this loop, for it to loop, just like your run, just like any other animation that needs to loop, the first frame and the last frame have to be exactly the same. Otherwise, you'll get a pop at the end of it, right? And then my jump down is very fast, right? In fact, it's probably still not fast enough though, right? Because he gets down to this pose, but then I still have like a lot of frames as he stands back up. So if my player decided to start running while he's standing back up, he's just going to be sliding as he's transitioning back up into that up pose, right? So I would make this even shorter. I'm probably going to make this like 6 or 7 frames and just get him down into that down pose. That way we can transition back up into the idle programmatically. So let's look at what, these are our animations on this character. Let's look at what's on the mannequin again and just sort of study what they have there. So again, jump start is the character going up in the air. Something you may notice from this is their jump start, they have him kicking his feet back. I guess they assume he's always going to be jumping forward, or he's mostly going to be jumping forward. And if he's not jumping forward, you're going to be looking at him from behind, so it's not really going to change how that looks as much, right? But it does have a nice little momentum to it. The difference in this animation and my animation is instead of stopping in this up pose, they start the character traveling back down and end him in the falling pose, right? Like he's going to hit the ground soon, right? And then that is the pose that they use for their loop pose. Now, either is fine. Both of these methods will work. But if we look at our loop animation, theirs is shorter. I don't know why, but they also have a little bit of a pop at the end of their animation. I think it actually looks not good, but that's fixable. And so it's going to continue to loop like that for as long as he falls, right? And then once he hits the ground, or once he makes contact with the ground, we get this. It's a very fast animation. It's 5 frames long, right? Actually, 4 frames long. So just like a hit, right? And the thing you'll notice on that is it starts the last pose of the idle, and it ends in this squash pose, right? Not the idle pose. The idle pose is upright. So what they're letting happen is the character can transition back into the idle using the state machine, right? So that's something we can study and build our own animations to have those in it. What I will say is doing the animations is just part of the process. Once you get the animations into Unreal, there are still things that can be messed up on it and how those play back. So it's worth looking at our state machine really quick. If I go to third person BP, then I go to blueprints and the third person character. Wait, I'm in the wrong spot. That's not right. I want to go to Liger and then CharAnim BP or blueprint. So you'll remember our animation state machine here. So these little arrows that have that little equal-ish sign looking thing there, that's the transition, right? So we're in one animation state. That is how it transitions to another. That transition is like a blend. If you ever use Premiere, you know how you can do like a cross dissolve between two video clips? Like that's kind of what's happening here. It's cross dissolving from idle to jump up, right? And that's what we're getting on that blend. Is if I click on this, you'll see it's transitioning and it's taking a duration of 0.2. I'm pretty sure that's 0.2 seconds or 0.2, it's either 0.2 seconds or 0.2 ratio of the length of the animation. But I'm pretty sure it's 0.2 seconds. So that means it's like, that's almost a quarter of a second it's taking just to blend into a 5-frame animation, right? Like, at that point, the animation's almost over. Right? So we can change that. Right? We can make that transition happen at 0.1 seconds, or if we want it to happen instantly, we can make it happen in 0 seconds. Right? It'll just pop into that next animation. Right? So we can play with that as one of the balances that we have on how these animations trigger for this sequence. The other thing we can mess with is these other transitions here. Like when I double click on this, it's just like, is it in the air or is it not, right? And that's an easy question. If it is in the air, it'll just start transitioning, right? Some of the others, the question is a little more complicated, right? So like this transition, the question is how much of the previous animation is left? How much of Liger jump up is left? And this is a ratio of the animation, right? So when 10% of it is left, when 0.1 ratio of that is left, it will start the transition. So basically, it's going to trim off 1/10 of your animation that's already 5 seconds, it's only 5 frames long, right? So you can change that ratio as well, right? To make it a little bit shorter, a little longer. Maybe it needs to be a softer transition, right? These are things that you can balance. And again, even with that, the duration of the transition is still 0.2 seconds on this one as well, right? So all of these are little things that you can change in order to make your animation play better. What I've noticed is a lot of times that transition is what messes up your landing. And so if you make this transition right here really short, is it in the air? It is not. Make it 0, right? If you make that really short, then that landing feels a little bit punchier. So let's see. Okay, so now that's hitting a little harder and playing a little faster. I feel like there's something else missing there, though. I bet it's the time remaining ratio. Yep. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That might work, too. This one here, but this is the one, not that. This is the one that needs to transition this one. Nope, I'm wrong. Anyway, I'll have to figure that out and play around with that. But those are things that we can change and test out to see if we can make that work better. Okay. Oh, that environment actually looks pretty good. Let's run around in it some. I want to run. I want to run like the wild liger I am. Watch him go. Run, 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 run. Wild and free. Anyway, so you can see why this would be a better environment to show off your animation, right? Apparently I can't go there. So for example, if you want to show off your jump, maybe you just have him jump off this, and that looks a little more interesting, right? Okay. So the last thing we want to talk about is the punch. Before I go into the punch, how y'all feeling about this jump? Am I cramming a lot in today?
I'm doing it 2D, so like, you know,
Yeah.
I don't have to do the whole thing, probably, maybe.
Yeah, well, I think, yeah, you're right. And I think the interesting thing about this to recognize is the game engine, no matter what, is the one that's going to make it jump, right? So you don't have to actually animate your character going up in the air in Maya. Right? Your character can just kick off the ground and then they're just hovering above the air a little bit, and then the game engine will make it happen. So really, if you're getting a nice cycle, more than likely just the loop part is going to work good in a 2D animation. You can make it work with the up and the end. It's it's kind of a cost benefit thing. Is it worth it for that animation? I remember Earthworm Jim animations. They had some really good jump up animations. So last thing I want to look at is the attacks. So the attacks, I'm not even going to hop in here into Unreal and talk about those too much because I don't really have a good one in there. All three of these are different attacks that I did for Battleborn, for Gearbox. These were all non-player characters, but their attack sequences would work the same way that a player character attack would. And I think there's three different attacks here that I wanted to talk about. So there are two of them with this character, but we'll see the first one there where the character takes a step forward, right? Then there's the second one where the character punches the ground, right? And then the third one where the character attacks forward, but then comes back to their neutral pose, right? Those second two are what you're going for, one of those, right? The reason for that is because if your character takes a step forward, like now you're outside of that castle, right? And once that animation is over with, the character will just snap back to that castle. It's going to feel weird. You can make that kind of animation work, but it takes a little bit more heavy programmer support. We got a student who's doing this in the first class, Dusty Graybill. He's trying to get that motion to work. It's called root motion. It's that your character travels forward and their root has to travel with them. And then wherever they end up, you can start the next animation at their new location instead of where they left from. But really the easier method is to make sure that your character steps back into your idle, right? Having said that, what that usually ends up meaning is, well, what that does mean is that your character or your attack has to start from the same pose as it ends in, right? And for there to not be a pop in that animation, that pose that it starts and ends in needs to be the first pose of your idle animation. Right? So you start in your idle animation, you go into your punch, and then you come back to your idle pose, right? So there are really like four things that the four poses you need to remember with your attack, right? You need to remember your start and your end pose. So we got two of them down because those are just your idle pose. What I wanted to look at here though was the sort of the difference between a punch and any other type of forward force action that we might need to use, right? So for example, we could look at a baseball pitch. So this is a slow motion baseball pitch, and we're gonna sort of step it up here a little bit, and I'm going to pause it in a few spots here. So right about here, probably about there. This is the frame right before your impact. Now we're watching it in slow motion, but the frame right before an impact would be something like this, because look how far his arm travels in the very last little bit of this, right? It goes from here and then very quickly all the way through, right? So if we look at an attack, we get that same thing. We get the pose right before, and look at his arm. It looks like it's broken. It's bent back so far. And then the pose of the impact. Right? Now, what I'd like to sort of think about in that is spacing. Right? If I go to, I always do the snipping tool here, right? If I go to the snipping tool, we look at this, right? There's this location, and then when he actually throws the baseball, it's like right here, right? That whole action right through there happens in one frame, right? That's a big space for that distance to travel. Now we're seeing it super slow motion, so it's taking more frames than one, but that is what we're really wanting to get, is that big spacing on our attack. Right? So if I go back and we watch the any of those attacks again, right? Let's go watch this one again. Let's watch this first one. Oh, too far. Let's watch these second ones. Okay, here's a good one. Okay. So if I step forward here, it does this like tell, right? It's like there's going to be an attack soon. Oh, come on. Let's try this again. Okay, so we start stepping forward on these frames. Come on. So VLC is a piece of crap sometimes. So we'll watch here if I can see if I can click through it one frame at a time. So this frame right here is the frame before the impact. So look where the hand is, right? And then the impact frame, I even missed it. So the impact frame is right there, one frame later. So that distance that the arm travels in that last frame is where all of that force comes from. If you want it to feel hard, you have that last frame have a big spacing in between right before and the impact, right? The ease into that can be smaller spacing, but you need that really big spacing. The object needs to travel a large space in one frame to get that impact. So really, to me, the two frames that are really important are the frame right before the impact and the frame of the impact. Now the other thing we can look at, crap, I just closed that down, didn't I? The other thing we can look at in this is, once he's done this pitch here, right there, right? Look at this right here. Look at how much he, oh. Look at how much he's leaning forward, right? So we really want it to feel like that force is driving forward, whether it's a kick or whether it's a punch. And to do that, like I see so many times that punch animation looks like this, right? Like this person just sort of throws their arm forward, but they're standing straight up, right? That doesn't have any force. Like, get your character forward and into it, even if they have to step back in to the original pose, right? That angling them forward is really important. And you'll see that in this animation, right? The character's like line of action is really something like this. It's probably a little bit more like this, right? I've even stretched the arm pretty exaggeratedly there to get that impact. Right? So that is something you really need to push in order to get that force forward. So really your four poses you need that are really important is the beginning and the end pose, right? Which is your idle pose, and then the frame right before the impact and the frame of the impact. Now how you anticipate into that is up to you. Sometimes people will have their character anticipate back with their upper body as they're stepping forward, very much like that baseball pitcher, and then they follow through with the punch. The same with a kick. Maybe you're leading with the hips, you throw your hips forward and then follow through with the foot, right? So there's lots of different options that you can use for any of that. So, questions on the attack animation? All right. Okay. So again, just kind of a quick recap of where we are. Thursday's class, we're going to come in, we're going to have one last graded group meeting with your mentors, right? And then a week from today is when the project will be due. What I'm going to do is, for the rest of this class, I'm going to let it be work time, but I'm going to encourage you to still meet with your mentors, even though that's not a graded element, just so you can get some feedback on what you've been working on so far. Even if it's just for a few minutes, just chat with them a little bit. And then the rest of the class is yours. So before I do that, any questions, comments, concerns, conundrums, culpabilities? I'm just coming up with C words now.
I should look over my run cycle before I do.
Sounds good. Oh, I did skip one kind of important thing. I'm glad you actually said that. The run cycle, we talk about those poses, contact down, passing and up, right? My 2 cents, you may have noticed this. If you, crap, I can't believe I skipped this part. If you notice, the contact pose is one leg really far forward, one leg really far back, right? I don't usually want to start with my contact pose. I usually try to start with a pose that is closer to my idle pose, right? And that's because then you don't get as much of a transition, as much as a pop every time you hit the start or the play button. So really your passing pose may be a good place to start. Recognize it's cycling, so it doesn't really matter which pose you start with. But you can do passing up, contact, down, passing, right? Like that's still the same cycle. It's just which frame is your first frame. And so for your run cycle, like once you get it cycling in the game, you can handle that. I do want to show you. I think we already kind of talked about it, but you would the same way we would make something cycle, like with the idle, like how we made the cycle with or turning on infinity and seeing the curve cycle. That's what you would do with your run as well. And then once you have it cycling, you can just pick the frame range you want to export out, right? Even if it's not the frame range you have keyframes on. Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the video and upload it to YouTube, and then I'll hop around. But the rest of the class is yours. So if you want to work, that's cool. If you're like, nope, I'm going for lunch, that's cool. But what I would encourage you to do is spend just a few minutes right now just meeting up with your groups and just hopping around. It's not a graded thing, but I think it's probably a good idea to get a little bit of feedback because it's been a while since you've probably chatted with them. So, all right, thanks y'all.